Just some thoughts on the nuclear submarine deal. We were protected by an anti-nuclear sort of treaty which banned the use of nuclear warheads or nuclear arms. It'll take us 20 years to achieve those capabilities. We ourselves do not have the brain power or the engineering power to manufacture these submarines by ourselves. So essentially, we're giving the money to the Americans to build them. As a cultural entity, Australia was protected by the Americans by funding many of their ventures within their cultural capital, which has been a loss out for basically the millennial generation because of internet piracy. I have tried to do the best that I can by buying books, buying a DVD collection, buying CDs, lots of other things, just supporting cultural products which get filtered back into the American system. But our generation of Australians, of millennials, were basically ingrained in internet piracy. So the money that used to be filtered to the Americans, which placed them in so much debt because of the Hollywood capital, because of internet piracy and all of these other things, basically became obsolete within those international relations because we were basically stealing from them. Our generation, the millennials, was. I personally wasn't really doing that as much. I was looking at YouTube materials and things like that. But the cultural capital that was being invested in the Americans and their entertainment industry would have been filtered back into the tax system, which would have gone on to the military budget. The military budget for the Americans is huge. They keep on funding it. So at this point, I would say that we're better off just investing the submarine deal into the Americans. We don't actually have the brain power to build them ourselves, so if we were going to organize that fleet would be directed by Americans anyway, and the strategic positioning of Australia within the Chinese waters would be beneficial to them, but in essence it's just buying more nuclear-powered submarines for the American fleet, which would be based within Australia. So it's basically, we have to build them, we should build them in some sort of way, but basically we'd be buying a fleet for the Americans, which would be directed by the Americans, and they would use Australia as a strategic position if anything were to occur with China. We wouldn't have the brain power to direct that fleet. Basically, they would put somebody who had been using that sort of technology in charge of that fleet anyway, which would be probably the Americans. So essentially what it is we're investing money into the American military by buying them a new fleet which is directed by the American military anyway. It'll take 20 years to create, but if we analyze it properly, it's just funding the American military budget. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but making us a nuclear target would be disastrous in any long-term run. In the short term, we would be protected by the Americans, and we would have to hope the Chinese doesn't escalate matters further. But that's basically essentially what it is. It's basically just investing into the American military by buying them more submarines that they can direct, because we're under direction of the American military anyway within our operations.